A very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning for the 69th Scotch Summit being organized on the state of governance theme. The two things that we are going to be discussing through the day is on the state of cities as well as the state of districts. And it's heartwarming to see that at 9 o'clock in the morning, the moment we opened the gates to the conference, we had more than 500 people joined in. And at this moment, there are 1,000 plus people from all across the country who have joined in to discuss such an important subject that it happens to be, which is the state of governance. All of us know and are aware that the cities are the engine of growth and are supposed to be a true reflection of India's federal polity, beginning with the 74th constitutional amendment, which recognized this, and also the local bodies as the third tier of government, mandated that the state governments transfer specific functions to the local bodies, such as urban planning, regulation, land use, public health, so on and so forth. We have traveled a long distance ever since. In the last few years, cities have rapidly grown and are getting integrated with the global systems and are aspiring to become globally competitive. Needless to say, they are also adopting modern practices and are becoming smart. Population and economic growth both have fostered urbanization in our country, and the number of urban towns, cities have drastically increased. Districts have played a key role in this. Although COVID-19 caught us all unawares and to an extent exposed the fragility of our urban systems, but the way we have responded, it is unprecedented and extremely commendable. It also goes to prove another thing. If we take systematic and a unified approach to respond and mobilize resources, which is the catchword, it is the cities where the battle is fought. And the outcomes in that, we are standing firm in the face of it, and the cities have started bouncing back and moving towards the recovery path. It is time to press on the accelerator to catch up with this change. Ladies and gentlemen, for this morning inaugural session, we are joined by luminaries, starting with Mr. Samir Kochhar, who is chairman, Scotch Group, a reforms historian, author of bestseller Modenomics. This in addition to 18 other widely acclaimed books. Interestingly, he started Scotch in 1997, dividing his bedroom half into office, and it's been an accomplished journey ever since. Welcome to you, sir. Dr. M. Ramachandran, who is a PhD and MPhil in economic planning from University of Glasgow, is former Secretary Urban Development to Government of India and Distinguished Fellow, Scotch Development Foundation. A 1972 batch IAS officer, he was Principal Secretary, School, Higher Technical Education in Uttaranchal, and Principal Secretary to the Chief Minister before elevation to the position of Chief Secretary. He was the chief architect of Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, JNNURM, as Secretary Urban, for which he was conferred the Scotch Challenger Award. For his work in infrastructure, he was called the Infrastructure Man. Author of 6 books, he was chairman, Delhi Metro and Kochi Metro. Let me welcome Ms. Karuna Gopal, Founder, President, Foundation for Futuristic Cities, IVLP Fellow, US Department of State, John F. Kennedy School of Government, member, BJP National Manifesto Subcommittee. She's an internationally acclaimed thought leader and a futurist and has influenced urban transformation in India for 1.5 decades. She has contributed to the design of the 100 Smart Cities mission, and her innovation, Sculpt Your City 2009, has shaped the mission guidelines and has been declared a national best practice. From West Bengal, we are joined by Mr. Sanjay Bansal, a 2004 IAS batch. Previously, he was CEO Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority, and his accomplishments in his previous roles, particularly as the DM of Darjeeling, have been remarkable, which were noticed by Kolkata, and he was shifted to the Health and Family Welfare Department, where he serves as its secretary. So ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I invite Mr. Kochhar for his opening comments. Samir, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Good morning. Just before I came in for this conference, I was looking at a Facebook post from a very seasoned journalist, very senior journalist, and a think tank friend of mine. And that post kind of raised a question in my mind, which is, do the governments fail people? Uh, Practically all my life, and I think what I'm going to say is going to be the antithesis of what I've stood for all my life. And I believe that governing based on felt needs of the people is an extremely, extremely important aspect of delivering citizen services. The services must be received. But historically, I find that citizenry across the world, not just in India, more so in India, but across the world, is very cynical of services delivery by the government. There are very few countries where citizens would feel very comfortable or confident that the government is the right thing. So this journalist friend of mine was talking about his work in an aspirational district, wherein he's trying to build a community road in a village, and this is a road which is going to be a common road for a lot of fish ponds that have come up. They're doing a lot of aquaculture kind of activities. So if such a common road were to come up, it would give a very good market linkage to the produce. And the big challenge that he faced was that over the years, it took a very, very long time for him to convince the farmers to give up part of the land and then approach the administration to make that road. He's now feeling a little frustrated that the administration is a little slow to respond. But the question that I had to him was that compared to the number of years that it took him to convince all these farmers to donate a part of the land to build the road, how much time did that take versus the time that this file is taking moving around in the offices? I think the answer to this question would be very telling to how we as people, when it comes to a micro level, I'm not saying people at large, I'm not saying country at large, I'm not saying district at large, but the minute you go to a very micro level, maybe you go to a street or a block or any one village, then it is always the biggest challenge, the biggest enemy is building consensus around felt needs. Well, that's the price of democracy you pay. That is what makes India vibrant. That is what keeps us going. But it is also a negotiation process, and it takes a very, very long time. So theoretically, what we have on paper is very good. We have a representative democracy. We have the most representative democracy in the world, because if you look at the third tier Gram Panchayat level, Panchayati Raj institutions, we have almost 1 million elected representatives other than the state and the central government that there are. So there cannot be a more representative democracy than this. But when it comes to allowing them to work, or so there is this whole school of people who supposedly represent our will, and we voted for them with their eyes open. And then there is the bureaucracy, which is supposed to take technically prudent, development oriented decisions. So the system should work, and it should work well, having made that choice. Unfortunately, I find that when it comes to a very micro level, so if you look at a district, perhaps it's easier. You look at a city, it becomes, if it's the smaller the city gets, the more difficult it is. And if it is a block level or a panchayat level or a street level or an RWA, it is almost impossible to build consensus. And there I find that this, while we are very acutely aware of our rights, I think one of the important things is also our duties as a citizen, which no one talks about. Participative democracy cannot be episodal. It has to be an ongoing exercise. You cannot wait for a legislation to be passed that has been in the making for 3 years and not say a word and then say that this does not suit me. Well, what were you doing when it was being discussed and what debated and it was being formulated? So therefore, I am not saying that you do not have a right to protest. Of course, you have a right to protest. But you would have had a more responsible right to protest had you participated in the policy making from the outset. So while we are all acutely aware of our fundamental rights, I cannot emphasize enough that there are fundamental duties that citizens have. Not many people know about it. It is for all of us to be acutely aware that these are the duties that we have, and we must, if you're true nationalist, if you're patriotic, and if you're saying that, you feel good for a socially inclusive India, and whatever be your challenge, then participate. Voting once in 5 years is not enough. Being an enlightened citizen is extremely important. And in that context, when we do our state of governance study, we look at states, we look at cities, and we look at governance. I've hardly come across one example, one example of a DC failing or a municipal commissioner failing or a city failing or any arm of the government failing. I think all governments, whether they are from opposition states, whether they are from ruling party states, whichever, they have come through shining, absolutely amazingly shining in the response in this very, very difficult time of COVID. And look at governments across the world, what are they facing? The biggest challenge that they face is citizen discipline, getting people to wear masks, getting people to socially distance, getting people to, do's and don'ts. So who's failing? And, I am not government, I am citizen. I am very much a part of the citizenry. So let us all together not fail the country. Just like the government is coming shining through, I think the responsibility of coming shining through is on all of us. COVID is not behind us. The second wave is perhaps ahead. And I think people have started taking things very lightly. There is only as much that the government can do. There's only as much a DC can do. There's only as much a municipal commissioner can do. The minute they press the pedal, they'll be called autocratic, they'll be called dictators, they'll be called all sorts of names. Tell me, where is the choice? And then as citizens, we stand up and we call them dysfunctional. And we say, कौन घर घर जा बोल सकता है? You see local lockdown and this opinion and tutorial tendency and job are very, very important. We must also act. With that, I think I've left something to chew on. I would be happy with Dr. M. Ramachandran, long-standing friend of mine, very seasoned bureaucrat, a person who's been Secretary to Government of India. He's been Chief Secretary in Uttarakhand, prolific. So, Dr. Ramachandran, your views on state of the cities, and you've been through a jury process for a very long time, and you looked at. I've talked about how passionately I've looked at cities and districts performing, and we have a lot of jury presentations or little initiatives that everybody did. So, what is your sense of state of the cities, and where do you think we are going, Dr. Ramachandran, please? You have to unmute yourself, sir.
Dr. Ramachandran, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. I thought, no, in some systems it's centrally unmuted, so I thought I was already. It's again. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Samir. I was mentioning, I hope technology cooperates, because some part of what you are saying, we missed out. So today everything is dependent on technology. So that becomes critical. And I do hope those who are from the area of technology would be able to pay attention to this fact as well, because fluent communication, proper communication is what is critical in today's scheme of things. We start with, when we look at the state of cities, of course, we cannot look at the state of cities in the entire country spreading over 4,000 or 8,000 plus cities or so. But generally, as you rightly mentioned, the first what comes to our mind is the pandemic and how the cities responded to the pandemic. And as you rightly said, it has been remarkable that cities rose to the occasion, cities or towns or whatever it is, of whatever sizes, rose to the occasion. And along with the systems in government, I always say district administrations play a great role. So being part of that scheme of things, remarkable work has been done. And it's a question of looking back and seeing what lessons have been learned as a result of this experience, which was totally unexpected. And what is it that we can do better in a situation like this? So it's both learning and preparing ourselves. And in that context, I must say some of the presentations which we had opportunity to see give great hopes about how cities can rise to the occasion and bring about changes, and how they can structure things at their own level, whether it is a big city or a small city. Naturally, we are not looking at big cities because they are resource-wise and the command-wise they are much better positioned. But I must mention some of the initiatives which we saw. There are quite a number of initiatives which were presented. Delivering people's requirements. That is something remarkable. I mean, suddenly the lockdown came, people were confined to their homes. So one didn't know how to get certain things and how to get some of the essentials and how to get immediate medical help. So we saw instances of people's requirements being delivered, even in a small place like Suryapet in Telangana. This was organized by the local body and the district administration, I would think. Similarly, Vijayawada also took this initiative. So it's a question of, being the friend philosopher to the common man, and what he or she requires, it becomes available at his doorstep. And that is a remarkable initiative which was taken. There are other lessons learned also, working together, how we can all come together and cope with the requirements of the time, of the challenges of the time. And there again, I must mention, though not directly in the area of the pandemic, we came across an instance from the city of Kozhikode in Kerala, which took up slum rehabilitation and shifted all those people who were living in slums to a properly built complex provided by private participation with an arrangement. So if I understood correct, the local body did not have to spend much money. Of course, that is a city and that's a state where there are not too many slums, but those who have slums, I think this is one way of looking at things, how best one can take advantage of private participation and leverage the same for one, bringing about the change required, and two, improving their lives in the cities. So also takes us to the requirement of health system improvements, which has come into focus during this time. We thought we have a vibrant system. Some states are ahead, some states are not. But what shortcomings there are in the health system, that has come to the fore. And I think that is something which the state governments and wherever the local bodies are mandated to bring about improvements, they have to focus on, because nothing like ensuring that every person in any part of the city or the town gets the required medical help and the link that is required. That is what is critical. And that is where I think this National Digital Health Mission, which has been announced, should make a big difference, because every individual will have what is called a health card, and it will get linked to the doctors, hospitals, the medical services one is available. So one doesn't have to produce lots of papers, and if it is some years old, one doesn't have to struggle how to locate that and make it available to the doctor. It's a key step, and I think the local bodies can be in the forefront as far as implementing this is concerned, so that everyone has a health card and he or she feels comfortable whenever there is a problem or emergency approaching a doctor or a hospital and linking his past requirements, past issues with the current day issues. And this becomes also important because we will be entering a vaccine regime very soon. And for that also for that to be handled properly without hassles, and reaching out to each and every person who can be part of that, and in an orderly way without creating any panic about that. I think that's also going to be very critical in the coming days. And I'm sure the local bodies with the experience they have had will be able to organize this in a smooth manner, so that everyone feels being part of the scheme of things and there is no tension or panic about these things. Then moving on to the basics of what a city or town should be doing. We all know it's basically water supply, sanitation, waste management, and things like that. Now, Amrut has a provision that every household should be linked with water supply connection, and sewage system. And about sanitation, the huge Swachh Bharat mission has taken us far ahead. Now it's a question of consolidating what has been done under that and some of the issues which need to be managed subsequent to the building of toilets. Toilets once built should not remain idle or not in use, because that's also a possibility. So how best to guide people to maintain it properly, maintain it, keep it clean, and make it part of the system of waste of management of the sewage system in the city or the town, whatever it is. That would be a critical issue. The leachate management would become a critical issue. So I hope cities and towns are able to take the required initiatives in this regard. We heard of an instance from Ramagundam in Telangana again, where 99% of households have been connected with the water supply. That's remarkable. I don't know whether there's a 1% still left, but even that 1% getting covered would make a huge difference as far as availability of water is concerned. And these are some of the fundamentals which we should have achieved long back. Water connection for every household so that they don't have to go look for water. Proper waste management, segregation, collection, so it's not left lying on the road. So we seem to be entering that scheme of things. And here again, I would like to make a reference to one of the presentations which was made during your process. That's about waste management in the city or town of Kalyan Dombivli, where zero landfill site is something which they have aimed at and they have been able to achieve. Because in future, we cannot have the luxury of landfill sites because one, land is limited, two, landfill sites lead to all sorts of health problems. So it's a question of segregation. Of course, in the larger scheme of things, it should be a reduction of waste in the overall scheme of things, but that does not seem to be happening. So how to avoid having huge landfills in different parts of the city? We cannot take it to the borders of the city so that the villages next to that suffer. We cannot take it to villages which are close by because they really do not like the waste from cities being dumped there. So we have data about quite a number of wards in our cities having organized waste collection door to door and with segregation arrangement. So it's a question of what further, and that could be a resource base for a single city body or a group of municipal bodies by deploying waste. That's a possibility which could be thought of in more detail. The next point I'd like to refer to is role of technology. There are cities which have gone in for complete digitalization during this process. Tadipalli is an example. There are cities which have developed an app which would be helpful to people, especially during the pandemic situation. Manhole management in the city of Dhule by using robotic machine. That's a classic example we've been talking about, and there are provisions that people should not be allowed to go into manhole to clean it and maintain it. So if they have got a machine system, robotic, which undertakes this task. And these are the types of developments which have to happen in our cities so that the conventional old system of not caring for the life of a person who goes into that, we do away with that. Doing away with manual scavenging, doing away with arrangements like this. And we also came across an instance of software used for design of the water project. It came from the city of Asansol, a water project which was there, lying there for quite a number of years, but someone took the initiative and took it forward, and in the process deployed technology so that all the details of the water project are properly mapped and it is properly executed. I'm referring to some of these examples because when we look at the state of cities, there are positive things happening, there are shortcomings, there are issues, but then particularly during the pandemic period, since we are putting it all together, it has been possible to see a great role for technology properly leveraged that could make a big difference as far as citizens' lives are concerned. E-toilets adopting sensor-based technologies to enable self-cleaning. That's another example which came before us. And of course, the integrated command and control centers, which quite a number of cities now have, especially in the smart cities, that has been able to aggregate city-level information and converting it into actionable intelligence. That is something remarkable, and that has come in handy. These are again things which should have been there in position quite some time back. Intelligent traffic management is something which quite a number of cities and towns have taken up. Under the smart city scheme, smart poles and things like that have come up, making life easier, and of course, leveraging the advantage of technology. Moving on to the resource part of local bodies. Probably this may not be the right time to talk about whether local bodies have been able to bring about improvements in their resource position, because these were challenging times. But even during these challenging times, what needed to be done through the state government provision, district pooling together, whatever could be done, and local body chipping in, it has been possible. I think it will be true of almost all our cities and towns to find the required resources to fight the pandemic, to provide what is required for the people, and take the agenda forward. And I suppose this is again a lesson learned, whereby in future also, when it comes to situations like this, local bodies would be able to muster the required strength to handle the situation. We did not see much of a focus on the resource improvement scenario as far as the local bodies are concerned. As I said, this may not be the right time, but cities have to think in terms of how best to improve their resources. They cannot just be dependent on what the state provides or the bigger tax base which they have. So things like credit rating of cities, issue of bonds, and what is most important is the central programs which we have. Those act as a big catalyst as far as cities and towns are concerned. So it is for the municipal leadership to see where the opportunity lies and how to leverage and take advantage of that. As I said, smart cities, integrated command and control centers. Pune is one city which has taken full advantage of that during this pandemic also. And I think something like 60 plus cities under the 100 smart cities have opted for having this integrated command and control center, where more or less everything relating to the city can be monitored and decisions can be taken on the basis of information which becomes available at a center like that. About the new initiatives in general, from the roundtable process, what we have seen is there are quite a number of good initiatives which have taken place in our cities and locally thought of, locally structured, and people coming together, the elected representatives, the civil service system, and people. And people are an important link in this process, and they have to feel participative as far as the process is concerned. So maybe it's time to think about how people's participation can be bettered. We heard about the ward secretariat system in the states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Long back, we had tried to introduce area sabhas. Hyderabad had taken the lead at that time. Guwahati is another town city we hear about which has an area sabha system. That is at the polling booth level, you have a unit of the local body where people can better address their requirements and problems. And personally, I think this is one of the most important requirements in today's scheme of things, because particularly during the COVID, what we noticed is, since we are left indoors, how to communicate and how to convey the requirements if there is something urgent. I would think about an old person, a disabled person, someone who requires continuous medical assistance. We saw the plight of the migrants who had a problem. We keep seeing the plight of household help who do not have any income source at that time, especially when they were not allowed to move out. So there are quite a variety of people who need help, and it is possible. And we came across earlier instances like in Gurugram and such other cities where everyone pooled together. Food was made available. It was distributed. It was available to people. Similarly, in Surat also, I think when there was a crisis, the migrant laborers were provided with food. So there are initiatives like this. So it's a question of structuring these when we have to face situations like this. So I refer to the various possibilities. The ward secretariats is one example. One could look at that. Then also the digitization has enabled smart cities to deploy innovative and state-of-the-art solutions to deliver citizen services. So since each state has at least one or two smart cities, one could look at how is it that the city has done differently in this area and try to take advantage of those facilitations and bring that type of technological facilitation to the cities and towns so that life becomes much easier. The personal contact era gets over, and we get into a regime where most of the things which a citizen require can be done through the technology part. Also, we came across instances where solar energy is being deployed for in some of the areas of municipal governance. That's a remarkable development, and that is something which we can tap. But it's all a question of how much resources becomes available. But if it's a good move, right move, I would think it will be possible for the local bodies to get the required resources pooled together at the local level. One cannot really depend on submitting a project and getting its approval, but there are the indication is that there are very many such areas where the local body itself can take the initiative, bring people together, make them participate in the process, demonstrate the advantages which would become available. And in a situation like that, I think very many problems which we face today can be overcome at the local level itself. But as I said, it's also important to look at national central programs, state level programs, and how best to leverage that and how to take advantage of that. Getting projects started and then ignoring in the meantime, that's not the right way of doing things. Getting projects properly structured, that is what is important. If there is a water supply project, one should make sure that the water reaches the households which the area is supposed to cover. And now we have to take a very critical stock of where we stand with regard to household connection of potable water for each and every household. Even if it's for a couple of hours, it should be done. 24/7 water supply is a possibility. Waste reduction, there are methods of doing it. Waste, as I said, various methods of managing waste and keeping the city or town clean. These are all possibilities which have got flagged during this period also. And I think it's for the local bodies, the leadership, and the person who can provide the initiative. Such people can bring about a big difference as far as system changes in the city are concerned.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramachandran, for so lucidly bringing together this 4-month evaluation journey. And all these people are a beacon of hope. I'm sure you have a lot more to say, and let me come back to you during the discussion part, and you can actively participate again. But you've so brilliantly brought together how the cities have responded to COVID, and they have been able to make a lot of difference and a lot of change. And we are all about measuring this incremental change, because most of the time officer is struggling just to maintain status quo because the resources are so stretched thin, the funds are not there, the functionaries are not there, but the functions keep going up. So how do you manage within all of that? And that is where the government has come up shining through. If you look at the result of this exercise, of course, I'm looking forward to your paper that you're going to write on all these changes that people made and what are the best practices that are emerging, and maybe others can take note of and learn from these practices. Equally important, like an open heart surgery, is that while they're doing a wonderful job at today's point in time, would they continue to do that job 5 years hence? What is the future of these cities? What is it that we will be celebrating 5 years hence? Unfortunately, because we are all so busy fighting status quo, there are very, very few future designers and architects in India. And it is indeed a pleasure to have Karunaji with us, who is one of the very minuscule, you can basically count them on your fingertips. She is like a future architect and a future envisioner for the cities. He has an extensive body of work. And what I really marvel about her work is that, planning for a futuristic city is like planning for an open heart surgery. You have a city which is not a greenfield city. It's a working, thriving system with a whole bunch of baggage and history. Now, within that, how do you impose or superimpose a futuristic vision and make sure that 5 years hence, when the city size is 1.5 times in terms of population or something like that, we do not fail. So, Karunaji, cities post-COVID, how do you look at the future of cities panning out? Do share your views.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kochhar. Thank you for inviting me today. Am I audible? Yeah. So thank you very much for having me today. It's indeed a pleasure to talk to many practitioners and a diverse group of people. I was given to understand you have close to 1,000 people today, so which is actually a great pleasure to interact with. So let me give a very macro perspective in terms of what we are likely to see very soon. My talk would be based on 2 articles that I read in the last week. The first article is from New York Times. And this article says, will the cities disappear totally post-COVID? The second article is by World Economic Forum, and it says that it is not to do with the location of a city. It's not to do with the location of a city, but it's to do with the behavior of people inside the city that tells us categorically whether we have COVID adaptation or not. So these are the two critical articles. Let me start with the first one. I said the New York Times one said that will cities disappear? I'm saying that it will never happen. Cities are here to stay. Now, why am I saying that? If you go back and check what happened in the past pandemics that have swept away the world in perhaps the past century or a little more, you saw that when the bubonic plague came, cities understood that they needed to have underground drainage. When cholera and typhoid came, cities were forced to look at their sewerage systems. And when tuberculosis happened, cities had no option but to understand how to get clean air. So that's when the building codes of many cities, many buildings have been changed, and the cities have been designed in such a way that air flows. So typically when you go back, take Spanish flu, any of these pandemics that have devastated the world have contributed positively to city making. They have shaped cities, but they have shaped cities only in the physical infrastructure. Now, coming to COVID, I'm compelled to say that COVID has given us enough reason to look at not the physical infrastructure of a city, but the soft infrastructure of a city. What do I mean by soft infrastructure? COVID is forcing us to look at the governance aspects. COVID is forcing us to look at our decision making. COVID is forcing us to look at our systems and processes. COVID is forcing us to look at the citizen centricity of our cities and governance. So if COVID is shaping our cities, it's shaping us not in the physical infrastructure aspect, but in the soft infrastructure governance aspect. Now, that is the first article that I read in NY Times. Now, let me come to World Economic Forum's article that says that it's COVID adaptation is nothing to do with the location. It's to do with the behavior of citizens. So what does it mean? It means that you could be in London, or you could be in a Lhasa. You could be in a Hong Kong, or you could be in Hanoi. You could be in maybe New York, or maybe in Nebraska. Nothing, your location is immaterial, because the people inside those locations, how they behave, will determine COVID adaptation. In your speech and also in Dr. Ramchandran's speech, both of you have touched this aspect that we complied. When our Prime Minister announced categorically that we're going to go in for a lockdown, everyone complied. We sat at home, we wore our masks, we maintained our social distancing. Now, many people around the world, some of my colleagues across the world were surprised that educated intellectuals have very silently complied with the request of the Prime Minister. So it is a behavior that matters. Now, coming to a nuanced understanding of what we did, which is very important for cities and adaptation, we have done three very important things. The first thing we did was we repurposed very intelligently our institutions and our people. If you see what was repurposed across the world, it was basically the drugs and medicines that were repurposed. When I checked with some of my doctor friends across the world, and I'm sure you also would have seen, that the drugs meant for epilepsy, the drugs maybe meant for some other neurological condition have been repurposed to treat COVID. But in India, what happened? We have repurposed our institutions. For instance, take IIT Delhi. IIT Delhi, that was doing cutting edge research in artificial intelligence, machine learning, was repurposed, and it quickly came out with test kits for COVID in the shortest of time. They have also carried out material research and came out with PPE kits that can breathe. So we have repurposed institutions. That's the greatest thing that happened in our cities and in our country. Then we have repurposed people also. Like the city that I come from, there is a very higher educational institution called IIIT, and the professors from there went to government hospitals and they started doing statistical analysis of COVID patients, putting them and segregating them, putting them in different buckets for their diagnosis and prognosis and treatment, which was repurposing people. So this is what India has done as far as repurpose is concerned. The second thing that we have done, this is very important, my friends, why I'm talking about this is, every little thing that I'm saying has happened in cities. And it has happened because of a certain ecosystem that is existing. The second thing we did was, we stuck to one concept called heuristic. We never cast anything in stone as far as our research or our, let's say, making our gadgets is concerned. When COVID hit us very badly, Prime Minister asked us to go for ventilator manufacturing. Everybody plunged into making ventilators. But at that time, we discovered that some of the patients were actually dying when they were intubated and attached to ventilators. That's because an already compromised set of lungs were collapsing when high pressure oxygen was given to them. So what happened in our cities is, we started looking at hybrid machines, machines that were a mix, a kind of hybrid machine between a ventilator and a respirator. This is what I call innovating on the go. This is what we have done. And it happened in cities because of an existing innovation ecosystem. That's the second thing that happened with us. And the third and the most important thing which we did was, we said, let's stretch our imagination and let's stretch our resources. That's something that we have done very brilliantly and beautifully. Now, that is as far as what we have done. Now, going forward, what we have to do. Post-COVID, there are three important things that I'd like to share. The first one is about technology. We've heard in the past presentations too how technology has helped. But going forward, our post-COVID cities have to categorically understand how to deploy technological solutions. And that is where I said the softer aspects of governance come in. For instance, in the past, we've always had a conflicting discussion between technology deployment and sustainable living. For instance, we used to have arguments like, should we have driverless cars or should we drive less cars? Should we have Internet of Things or should we go for interacting with people? Open data or open spaces? These discussions used to happen continuously. But going forward, what is important is our decision makers have to understand the value of technology and how much to use and how to use. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so COVID times categorically proved that technology has helped us in terms of e-learning, e-virtual working, e-medicine. I thought e-medicine was a pipe dream when Cisco came to India in 2005 and set up their big establishment. I thought it was a pipe dream, but it's happening. And COVID has categorically proved. I thought when our young startups started looking at machine learning and artificial intelligence for diagnosing health problems, I thought we are far way off. But these people have proved today that their technologies have helped. So going forward, our cities, post-COVID cities, will rely quite heavily on the technology. Point one. Now, point two, we all have seen that when cities looked for sustainability, like in maybe JNNURM or even in smart cities or Amrit, we started talking about public transportation and we started talking about dense cities. Now, in COVID times, both have been counterproductive. Public transportation has not helped during COVID. Density and dense cities have not helped. If you look at the number of people traveling, the metro in metro in Delhi was carrying 26 lakh people a day. but now it's carrying not even 5 lakhs. So people are afraid to take up public transportation. And therefore, the private transportation is increasing, and we have to, going forward, we need to understand how to strike a balance between the private transportation that is eventually not going to help. So this is the second point. And the third point is about urban health. The most important thing, historically, we talked about health of an economy, economic health, but we never talked about health of people in cities. Now, post-COVID, we need to understand, get down to the brass tacks of what it takes to keep our people in cities healthy. For instance, cities, people in cities have something called, they experience triple disease burden. What is triple disease burden? We have infectious diseases, we have non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes mellitus, and cancer, and neurological diseases too. The third one is accidents. In the past, we thought infectious diseases are not for the rich, but COVID proved us wrong. We are all better placed in life, but all of us got COVID. Now, the second myth is NCDs. They are called lifestyle diseases. If you're obese, you'll get cancer, you'll get cardiovascular disease. Again, we proved wrong because in the slums, the incidence of NCDs is very high. Now, accidents. Private vehicles are singularly responsible for accidents. And we need to now get down to the bottom of how do we deal with the triple disease burden in the cities. So as I said, COVID will force us to look at governance, decision-making, systems, be it public health systems or delivery systems. It is going to force us to look at citizen centricity. So as I see, the post-COVID cities will perhaps be better governed cities. We will start looking at systems, processes, and a vision, better vision for cities, a holistic vision for cities. And perhaps the way we have dealt with COVID, India is again going to become a beacon light of hope for the world, not only in managing COVID, but also setting a vision and way ahead for other cities in terms of managing highly congested, highly complex, multiply layered complexities for the world to see and learn from us.
Thank you so much, Karuna ji. That is a very thought-provoking speech that you made. अब गुरशरण जी, ऐसा है कि कुछ साथी हमारे ऐसे हैं जो कि हिंदी भाषी हैं और वो भी पार्टिसिपेट करना चाहते हैं, तो मेरा हब स्पीकर से ये आग्रह रहेगा कि आप जो भी बोलें थोड़ा सा अगर बाइलिंगुअल कर लें या उसकी समरी हिंदी में बतला दें तो सबके लिए बहुत अच्छा रहेगा। तो जैसे करुणा जी ने बताया है अभी कि जब ब्यूबोनिक प्लेग हुआ था तो सिटीज के अंदर सीवरेज सिस्टम आ गया और सैनिटेशन पे काफी फोकस आ गया। इसी तरीके से जब भी कोई महामारी आई है तो सिटी का कैरेक्टर बदला है, बिल्डिंग के कोड आ गए, अगर कहीं पे अर्थक्वेक आया तो उसमें सेफ्टी प्रिकॉशंस आ गई, जैसे पहाड़ में कहीं अर्थक्वेक आया, उत्तराखंड में बहुत, तो काफी फोकस आर्किटेक्चरली और बिल्डिंग रेगुलेशन वगैरह पे जाने लगा। तो इसी तरीके से उनका ये मानना है कि जो हमारी फ्यूचर की सिटीज हैं, कोविड ने हमें काफी लेसन दिए हैं, तो हमारी जो एग्जिस्टिंग चीजें हैं उनको हमें एक नई सोच के साथ लेके आना है। कौन सा काम हम डिजिटल ज्यादा से ज्यादा कर पाए, डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे बहुत फोकस रहेगा, डिजिटल सर्विसेज डिलीवरी पे बहुत ज्यादा फोकस रहेगा, गवर्नेंस पे बहुत फोकस रहेगा, सिटीजन्स की पार्टिसिपेशन में बहुत फोकस रहेगा। ये सब उन्होंने बतलाया। मैं संक्षेप में आपको बतला रहा हूँ। उसी तरीके से डॉक्टर रामाचंद्रन, जो मेरे से वैसे तो साउथ इंडियन है, दूसरे अच्छी हिंदी बोलते हैं, उत्तराखंड के चीफ सेक्रेटरी थे, तो संक्षेप में उन्होंने ये बताया कि सिटीज के अंदर कितना अच्छा काम हो रहा है। उन्होंने 15-20 म्यूनसिपैलिटीज और डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स के उदाहरण दिए जो हम लोगों ने इवेल्युएट किए हैं, और उन्होंने बताया कि कितना अच्छा काम किया है। और वो चाहते हैं कि ये जो अपनी टियर 3 गवर्नेंस है इसको और फाइनेंसेस मिले, इसको और सुदृढ़ किया जाए और इसको साथ लेके हमें चलना है। बिकॉज कोई भी अगर आपदा आती है तो फ्रंट लाइन रिस्पॉन्स इन्हीं सिटीज का रहेगा। गुरशरण, आप कुछ इसमें ऐड करना चाहेंगे बिफोर वी गो टू वेस्ट बंगाल?
जी, रामचंद्रन साहब ने एक बहुत अच्छी बात कही कि जिस तरीके से सिटीज ने अपने आप को ट्रांसफॉर्म किया है, वो एक अच्छे आयाम को लेकर चले हैं जिसका कि बेस इनोवेशन पर आधारित है। तो वही चीज़ जो थी, करुणा ने ये भी कही कि जो पोस्ट कोविड सिटीज़ जो अपने आप को बदल रही हैं, उसमें एक टेक्नोलॉजी का बहुत बड़ा हाथ रहेगा, लेकिन वो टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं जो कि वो शायद जो कि MIT में होती है या फिर बड़े बड़े इंस्टीट्यूशंस में की जाती है। रिस्पॉन्स जो है कोविड में जो आया है, वो सिटीज़ के एक गवर्नेंस को ध्यान में रखते हुए आया है। तो रामचंद्र साहब ने भी यही कहा कि जिन सिटीज़ को पिछले 4 महीने में हमने स्टडी किया और जितना प्रोसेस में वो हमारे साथ थे, निकल करके यही आता है कि अगर ये एक मिला जुला रिस्पॉन्स कोविड को ना होता तो शायद हमारे सामने जो स्थिति आज है शायद इससे बदतर होती। तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि जो आपदा पूरे देश पर पड़ी, उसमें गवर्नेंस का रिस्पॉन्स बेहतर था, सिटीजन्स का रिस्पॉन्स बेहतर था, और आने वाले समय में क्योंकि एक जो हमारा पब्लिक सिस्टम है और गवर्नेंस है, तो सिटीज़ को ये माना जाता है, जैसे कि अगर हम दोनों लोगों की बात को एक शब्द में, एक सेंटेंस में कहने की कोशिश करें, कि गवर्नेंस में एक भारी इम्प्रूवमेंट होने वाली है, जो कि ऑलरेडी हमें दिखना शुरू हो गया है। इकोनॉमिक हेल्थ देश का बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है, लेकिन सिटीज़ जो है इस वक्त सब फोकस है हेल्थ ऑफ सिटीजन, कि किस तरीके से हमारे अपने जो लोग हैं उनकी हेल्थ को सिक्योर किया जाए। और जैसे जैसे आगे बढ़ते हैं उसमें प्राइवेट सेक्टर का एक बहुत बड़ा योगदान भी होता हुआ दिखता है, ओवर एंड अबव जो पब्लिक सेक्टर का योगदान रहा है। तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि जो हमारा फ्यूचर ऑफ सिटीज़ है और जो हम देखते आए हैं शायद 1 साल पहले तक, पिछले 6 महीने में काफ़ी कुछ बदल गया है, हमारा अपना देखने का अंदाज बदल गया है। और उसी वक्त आगे अगर हम बढ़ाएंगे तो आने वाले वक्त में आपदाओं से निपटने के लिए और गवर्नेंस को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए हमारे सामने बहुत नए नए आयाम खुल करके आने वाले।
धन्यवाद Gurcharan. With that, we move to West Bengal. Now, West Bengal is a state which is a very exciting state. It's always full of news. You open any television channel, you see West Bengal, and you see a lot of vibrant democratic discussion that is going on around what is happening. However, in all this discussion about politics and policy, sometimes beacons of hope go under the radar. West Bengal also happens to be a state which has given a holistic and a fairly well-rounded response to COVID in the state. Since the news that comes out of West Bengal is otherwise so compelling, sometimes you find that news such as this takes a backseat. So we have the pleasure of having with us Mr. Sanjay Bansal, who is Secretary Health and Family Welfare, who is going to tell us about how West Bengal as a state responded to COVID. बंसल साहब, अगर आप एक दो शब्द बीच में सेंटेंस संक्षेप में हिंदी में भी बता पाएं तो।
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, हिंदी में भी बोलेंगे, अंग्रेजी में बोलेंगे। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर गिविंग मी दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी समीर जी। एंड सिंस यू नो दैट पिछले 1 साल के अंदर जो सबने बताया कि देखने का नजरिया और हमारा काम करने का नजरिया बिल्कुल बदला है। जनवरी 2020 में थोड़ा आपको हिस्ट्री भी बताऊंगा, मे बी दिस लिटिल बिट ऑफ हिस्ट्री विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द पेंडेमिक व्हिच वी हैव सीन इन लास्ट 2-3 centuries since say Black Death. 1300 something to 1400 something Black Death, where approximately maybe around 20-30% of the population of the world खत्म हो गई। उसका रिस्पॉन्स उसके बाद भी लाइक ह्यूमैनिटी चलती रही। उसके बाद भी वी ग्रू फ्रॉम मे बी 100 million to 1.7 billion in 1918 when the Spanish flu came. And during the Spanish flu also means approximately people say means it is on in the recorded history, because prior to that maybe history is not there with us, the true history. But during Spanish flu approximately maybe 1 in 3 person means in the entire world was affected by the Spanish flu. And where approximately more than means again the number may vary, because the number which we are having right now in India or maybe across the world with respect to the COVID may also vary, how many people have got infected or died, or maybe because of the collateral damage which we are seeing because of the COVID in different institutions, whether it is education or health or transport or migrant workers. So that it is manifold. Say approximately 6 to 7 lakh people died because of the Spanish flu. Then we have seen many other waves of different type of viruses, that maybe H2N2 H3N2, maybe in swine flu in 2009. That time also we were able to control the spread of swine flu with the active involvement of the public health officials and the public in general. Then why the situation, see, since 1918 in 2020, maybe around almost 100 years back and now, the technology has changed, the mode of travel. That time there was no plane. Not many people were traveling from one country to another country. The people are traveling, people are mixing. So we are living in a global village where one particular, maybe few people who have been found to be with the new strain in UK, we are worried because the same strain may come now to India and we may be seeing the virulence or maybe the second wave, which we call. So we have to be very, very alert and ready to face the challenges. So how we responded since January 2020 till December of 2020. In January, 17th of January, when it was sounded कि हमारे यहाँ पे आ सकता है, मतलब some cases were there in other countries, but we could see 26 जनवरी के आसपास हमने देखा कि हांगकांग के बहुत सारे, मतलब हांगकांग का जो पिक्चर्स आती थी व्हाट्सएप पे फ्लो करती थी कि पिक्चर दिख रही है वहां की कि वहां का एयरपोर्ट बंद पड़ा है, वी वर सेइंग कि अरे वहां पे बंद पड़ा है, यहाँ पे तो बिल्कुल नॉर्मल है, यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं होगा. बट in just couple of days or couple of months, the situation changed. So whatever we are seeing in other part of the world may again, we may see again in India, but the response which we have since March of 23rd, when the country went for a lockdown, March to then May, because these are the phases in which we responded. January to March was a different response by health official as well as the entire government. Then March to May, when the unlock started in the month of May, that time the response was totally different, where everything was closed, where even the food which was supposed to be made available to the people, those who are migrating from X to Y and those who are under lockdown conditions, where no transportation was working, where even protective gears for the healthcare workers and the frontline workers were not available in the country, where people innovated, means the local people innovated, because we could not import anything from outside. We could not bring anything from outside, even within the country also. So within the localization, people started manufacturing their own PPE, own mask and other things. So the innovation has taken place, local innovations. Then in the May to August, then there was another phase where there was rising trend of COVID patients in the hospital. We were worried whether our hospital will be able to cater to so much of flow of people, flow of patients. Then August to October was a different phase. Then October to December, because in October we thought that because of puja everywhere, means whether it is Ganpati puja or Durga puja or Kali puja or maybe different type of festival, Chhat puja. So we were thinking that post puja there will be a surge of cases in each and every city, but that didn't happen. Means why it didn't happen? Again, we have spoken to the virologists, we have spoken to the epidemiologists. What is the reason why so many cases have not come? Even the cases have declined. Say in almost all the cities, all the states, those who are reporting on the portal, saying that cases, say in West Bengal also we had say 3,500 cases or 4,000 cases in the month of October. Now it is only 1,200. So even post puja, post opening up, post starting of trains, suburban trains and long distances trains, air route is open. So the number of cases have gone down. So we have to look for answers why this is so. And this is the way, this is the role of the health officials as well as the virologists and the epidemiologists. They must look for the reasons. And what will happen in future? Like we are coming up with the vaccine will be given to the maybe frontline health worker first, then maybe to the general population or those who are with the comorbidity, those who are in the front line workers. So the means from health point of view, you must see that what mutation has taken place in the virus, whether a new strain of virus is coming from other part of the country or other part of the world or not. Then medication, the vaccination, and the protocol which we are following right now is the social distancing, wearing masks, and like reporting of fever, self-reporting, that is very important, self-reporting and protocol at home, and a social grouping model where if we leave, because we interact with very few people in general, not many people, we don't interact with say around 200 or 300 people in a day. If we monitor the health of each and every person to whom we are interacting, then we will be able to control the spread of the disease. So in West Bengal, I would say that in last say this journey from January till December, the response has been phenomenal. In the project which we submitted was integrated helpline, COVID helpline, because when everything stopped, only two things were working. One is IT and second was telephony. So people could interact only on telephone or through emails and everything. So that time the patients who were in the need of medical treatment, so we opened, means West Bengal opened a integrated helpline, COVID helpline. They gave medical consultation, teleconsultation, psychological consultation, as well as reporting of people to the call center for medical help, for testing and everything. So the entire response of West Bengal, and this is true to each and every other city and other states, has been phenomenal. So I think that from health point of view, and in West Bengal, we are monitoring the situation in such a fashion that the second wave should not come. Even if it is coming, then we have to be ready and we should not put our guards down. We have to maintain the protocol which has been set in last 1 year, the lessons which we have learned in last 1 year. We should not forget those lessons. And technological innovation will take place, and this is the only way we survived last so many epidemics, and I hope we will survive this also. And West Bengal is there for innovations and giving services to the people.
धन्यवाद संजय जी.
I'm not speaking with respect to the numbers because every state is having its own. समीर जी, हर स्टेट के पास अपने नंबर है. हमने कितने CCU बनाए, कितने कंसल्टेशन दिए. These are all figures available to the public. So, and response, you could see that being one of the metro cities is where we live in Calcutta, the greater Calcutta is having more than 1.7 crore population. And we could contain the spread of the disease only to maybe 1200 to 1500 cases a day. And now the cases have gone down to 200 to 300 in Calcutta. So the response has been.
हम आशा करते हैं कि ये ऐसा ही रहे. धन्यवाद बहुत बहुत आपका. क्योंकि समय की थोड़ी सी कमी है, अब हमें आगे चलना पड़ेगा. तो डॉक्टर रामचंद्रन, जो आपने करुणा जी से सुना और जो आपने संजय बहल जी से, बंसल जी से सुना, अगर आप संक्षेप में हिंदी में टिप्पणी दें आप अपनी, तो काफी अच्छा रहेगा सबके लिए.
हिंदी में टिप्पणी गुरशरणी अच्छा है, लेकिन मैं समझता हूँ कि इन दोनों को सुनने से जो पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं उनको ये लाभ हुआ होगा कि एक तो एक हिस्टोरिकल पर्सपेक्टिव हमें उपलब्ध हो गया है कि ऐसा नहीं कि वो पैंडेमिक जैसा इस समय का सिचुएशन पहले कभी नहीं था, लेकिन जब कभी कोई पैंडेमिक आया उस समय हमने अपने सिस्टम को चलाने का जो साधारण प्रक्रिया है उस पर कुछ बदलाव लाया. अब वो जरूरी है. और एक तरह से कोविड का एक लेसन ये भी होना चाहिए कि हमने क्या देखा, क्या पाया, क्या कमी था. आगे कभी इस तरह का कोई सिचुएशन आए, ये जरूरी नहीं कि वेट करेंगे सिचुएशन के लिए. इस तरह कोई सिचुएशन आए तो उसको बेहतर हैंडल करने के लिए हमें किस तरह का तैयारी करने की आवश्यकता है, ये जरूरी है. अब उन्होंने एक स्टेट लेवल एक्सपीरियंस बताया कि किस तरह उन्होंने स्टेट लेवल पर किया है. पुनः मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि जो भी हमारे ये फंक्शनरीज हैं, लिमिटेशंस होते हुए जो काम निभा रहा था वो बहुत खूबी से निभा है. अब वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है क्योंकि हर चीज के लिए रिसोर्स, धनराशि की आवश्यकता होता है. धनराशि उस तरह नहीं है कि हम अभी चाहे ये करें, वो करें, ये इनोवेशन करें या ये रिसर्च करें या ये रिसर्च निकालें या ये इक्विपमेंट तैयार करें, वो इमीडिएट होता नहीं है. लेकिन पूलिंग टुगेदर जो मिल करके जो कार्य हो सकता है वो कार्य करने में, और मैं समझता हूं कि वो ऊपर उभर के आता नहीं है. जैसे मैंने कहा कि 4000 प्लस लोकल बॉडीज या छोटे टाउन मिलाकर जो 8000 के ऊपर हमारे टाउन्स हैं, हर एक टाउन में किस तरह क्या काम हुआ और उसमें किस तरह स्थिति को संभाला. और उसमें मैं जिला प्रशासन को भी एक महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका उनका भी बताना चाहूंगा, क्योंकि जिले में एक मिलकर के चलने का एक आदत होता है, स्पेशली किसी क्राइसिस के टाइम पर. तो वो संपन्न हुआ। लेकिन उसका मतलब ये नहीं कि लोकल बॉडी ने जो पहल किया है उसको हम नजरअंदाज करें। बहुत सारे उस तरह के इनिशिएटिव से वो सामने आया है और वो जरूरी है। और ये आगे के लिए इस बात का भी द्योतक है कि हम इस पैंडेमिक को इस तरह मिल करके कर सकते हैं, सिटीज का हालत सुधरने में और सिटीज को एक अच्छे लेवल पर पहुंचाने में और साधारण नागरिकों को एक अच्छा प्रशासनिक व्यवस्था उपलब्ध कराने में हम बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं। वो क्षमता हम में है, लेकिन उसके लिए वो काम करने की इच्छा शक्ति, उसको जोड़ने और उसको साथ रखने की आवश्यकता है। और ग्लोबली पूरे दुनिया में देखें तो कई देश ऐसे हैं कि जहाँ पर साधन अच्छे हैं, व्यवस्था अच्छा है, लेकिन ऐसे भी देश हैं कि जहाँ पर उतना अच्छा नहीं कि, लेकिन वहाँ पर भी मिलकर के कार्य करने का एक प्रक्रिया संपन्न हुआ। और आगे के लिए जैसे वेस्ट बंगाल में भी अभी बताया, करुणा जी ने पहले बताया कि सिटीज के रेलेवेंस के बारे में, सिटीज क्या कर सकते हैं और इस पैंडेमिक के दौरान जो हम अनुभव किए उसके आधार पर आगे हम क्या सुधार ला सकते हैं। मोटे तौर पर मेरे ख्याल में ये संदेश बहुत स्पष्ट होकर के सामने आता है। थैंक यू।
Dhanyavad, Dr. Ramachandran. As you may have noticed, we are 20 minutes behind, so we'll have to sprint and maybe take away a bite from the lunch. I thank all the distinguished panelists, and as you may have noted that there is an audience poll. Each one of us is being rated by the audience, and I'm very happy to see that every speaker in the session has been very highly rated by these 1,000-odd people. Almost 60 to 70% of them are participating in the poll and telling us that they're liking what they have heard. So thank you so much, Dr. Ramachandran. Thank you very much, Karna ji, and thank you very, very much,